Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth.
Hello and welcome back to the Family Beacon podcast with Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud from Minnesota Family Council, where you can get the facts so that you can stand for truth. We are here. It's going to be June 10th when you watch this. By that time, registration for our annual dinner will be closed.
What a shame. So if you missed out, that's a bummer. Don't miss out on our next one.
It is a bit of a you snooze, you lose type of thing. Mm-hmm. I did send out an email to many thousands of you today.
Like 5 different emails.
I sent lots of emails.
Yeah.
Telling you to register for the dinner. And for those of you who will be joining us, I'm really excited to say that this will be our largest dinner in years.
Wow, really?
Yep.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
It's very cool. And so we're really excited for that event.
We're excited to meet a lot of you there. Make sure you come talk to me and Moses.
We're
pumped.
Yeah, we're going to have... there's all sorts of special things there for people who enjoy the podcast. So just so you know. It's going to be... We're
also releasing something really exciting at the dinner.
We are. We have an
what
exciting announcement that we can make at the dinner, but we can't make any hints.
Can we hint what it is, but not say?
No,
okay. You guys will
hints.
love it. I'm pumped. Moses and I have been working on it. Mostly Moses, and then I just made a few edits. But you guys, it's going to be great.
Yeah. Keep watching Instagram as well. You'll get more hints there as well. So, Grace, it's June. Mm-hmm. It's the best month because this is the only month. It is summer in Minnesota, which is, as you all know, the best time to be alive, and the time when we're able to look at other states and say, "Ha! For once, our weather is not worse than yours, and probably much better." But it's June, and that means that it's the month. It's Pride Month, the only deadly sin to get its own month, as people like to point out. Pride Month is really interesting. Christians are, I see a lot of Christians making fun of it on social media, and I fully join in with that. It's a stupid, stupid idea.
Shots fired by Moses today.
It is. It's not. It's stupid, and I can say that.
Moses, you're just such a hater.
Yeah, exactly. I can say that I would happily have a cordial discussion about it with anyone who disagrees, but I personally believe that it's stupid. I also believe that it's damaging for this to be such a cultural thing that is such a huge deal in our culture. But you passed on a really good article to me that maybe took a more serious and gospel-focused view of Pride Month. Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is an article by Kevin DeYoung. It was posted on written for World magazine, and the title of it, Moses, is called The Indelible Conscience and a Month of Pride. And then the subtitle, The LGBTQ Quest to Turn a Moral Argument into an Emotive Appeal for Affirmation and Acceptance.
Wow.
So even that title there, right? That kind of, it's straight to the point. I want to read you just some key takeaways from this, and then I want to get your reaction, because you haven't read it yet. I just briefly told you some highlights, and you said, Grace, we should really talk about it on the podcast.
That's true.
So here's part of what he says in this article. He says, Pride Month is at once a brilliant marketing strategy and a striking reminder that the conscience is a terrible thing to waste. By linking gay liberation to pride, LGBTQ advocates, and it's worth mentioning that the 5 letters only fit together in uneasy alliance, which is very true, hit upon an ethical and strategic coup. The rallying cry of pride.
It's pronounced coup.
Coup.
It's French.
As I was reading it, I was just like,
I'm so sorry.
Anyways, the rallying cry of pride transformed their quest for culture-wide moral legitimacy, a daunting task, into a personal plea for therapeutic well-being, a much easier goal. The debate would not be a head-on, rational discussion about whether the sexual revolution was accepted by the standards of God's word, natural law, or Western tradition. The debate would not be about what was good for children, good for the public, or even good for those drawn to LGBTQ behavior. Instead, Pride made the debate about feelings of personal acceptance. Changing the culture is hard work and takes a long time, about 50 years, it turns out. Convincing people to stop making other people feel bad is a much easier sell. Now, something I'd want to say after this first paragraph of reading is it's kind of strange because, growing up, I was a teenager, not that long ago, but just growing up, I felt like
5 minutes ago, really.
It wasn't, I didn't feel like this was that prevalent when I was growing up. And I don't know if that was because I wasn't following the news very closely, Moses, but honestly, I think it's more so because over the past 3 years, I would say this has become so much more mainstream. Do you feel like it's been 3 years? Do you feel like it's been more?
Geez. Yeah. I mean, I've actually thought about this. I've gone into stores, Target specifically, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I've gone into stores, and I've seen the insane profusion of Pride merchandise at the store, especially the one where I used to go to. They do seem to vary it from store to store, which is interesting. But the one I used to go to on University Avenue is the busiest one in Minnesota, and there would just be essentially like a 2-story Pride display. But I've thought, like, did they make as big of a deal out of this when I was a kid? And I'm sure they did not. I think I hadn't heard of Pride Month when I was in high school, but I don't think that major retailers were doing anything like that.
Even for me, and I graduated from high school in 2019. That is not that long ago, but it wasn't that big of a thing. But suddenly it's everywhere, right?
The culture, the whole slippery slope thing, the idea, conservatives, you're always talking about these bad things that will happen on 20 years or 50 years, and there's a strength to that argument in a certain sense, because this person is saying, well, yeah, you're saying this thing is going to happen, but it's not happening yet, so you have no proof. But when the progress of cultural decline really quickens, like we're in a bobsled, and if you're an Olympic bobsled, those things go fast. But like if you're in a bobsled going down the hill, you're going to pick up speed and momentum. And if that's what's happening in our culture, I'm not saying that's the only way to read what's going on. It's not just declining. There are things that are improving. But if we're going downhill and we're at, the speed at which we're going means that the things that conservatives have predicted were going to happen 20 years ago,
happen a lot faster.
They're happening a lot faster, and it ends up that we get proved right more often and more quickly.
It's a depressing point, but I think it's a good point. Because, back when Minnesota Family Council launched the Minnesota for Marriage campaign, I was 11, so however many years ago that was. That was a long time ago, right?
You were 11?
10 years.
4 years ago. Okay.
Okay, it was about 10 years ago. And basically, I just remember it was a whole debate about should marriage be between one man and one woman, or should we change the definitions of marriage legally? And people at MFC then were arguing against that, but then when they were also looking towards the future and they were warning about things that we're actually seeing today. And now things have gone drastically changed in such a short amount of time. Now, it was even just a few years ago, I think, MFC started warning about pedophilia becoming more mainstream, and now look at what's happening, right? Yeah. Now there's been so much in the news this week, so many tragic things. And trigger warning, I guess I should say, in case you have kids in the car. But just this recent story about parents that are taking kids to drag clubs, and they're helping kids stuff money into strippers' undergarments. And they're looking on, and they're smiling at their kids.
Yeah.
If that's not a sexualization of children, I don't know what is. And we warned against this. That's the thing. And they didn't believe us. Mm-hmm. They didn't believe us, Moses. And it's happening.
It is happening. And then there's people in the rainbow bubble on Twitter being like, conservatives, you guys are just being whiners again. What exactly is inappropriate about exposing kids to drag? And it's like, and then like this person in particular that I'm thinking of, was like presented with evidence of it being nasty, the thing that you just mentioned. And they're like, I say again, where is your evidence that this is unsuitable for kids?
Was this a parent that was saying that?
No, it was
but there were parents in the background of the pictures of that event, and the parents are smiling and they're taking pictures of it and they're applauding, and you think, like, what parent in the right mind would subject their children to that?
Another left-wing thing. So remember that the left can't meme. So here's a left-wing meme. So there's a picture of two little boys, 10 years old or so, at Hooters. And they're surrounded by Hooters waitresses. And the Hooters waitresses, of course, are not wearing enough clothes. And the idea of the meme is, this is what conservatives do. And liberals do drag queen story hour. And it's basically a moral equivalency. And so, first of all, you shouldn't take your kids to Hooters. I've never heard of Christian people, taking their kids to Hooters. Conservative people, I've never heard of that being something that conservative or liberal parents actually think is acceptable. Hooters is stupid and crass and vulgar, and in much the same way that Drag Queen Story Hour is. But Drag Queen Story Hour is additionally making a parody of womanhood because it's like blackface, as we've discussed
That's
before.
The thing. How come the culture doesn't see that as disrespectful towards women?
I know.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways.
It's a very strange place to be culturally. Absolutely.
It honestly scares me. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, but when my generation grows up, I mean, we're already growing up, but when we have kids, I hate to think the state that our culture is going to be in, honestly, because it's already this bad. We already can't define what it means to be a woman. We already don't know when life begins. I mean, what more is there to lose? I mean, I guess a lot more, but it just...
Well, and I want to say on that note, though, maybe we're making progress on the one issue. Like, maybe we are helping our culture to redefine when to understand when life begins.
And we are.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think, we're going to be able to win on the other issues if we win on this issue, on the life issue, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We can win on that issue, which we're winning. I mean, Dobbs will be released any day now. So thrilled. Oh,
yes. That reminds me. Remember that when Dobbs v. Jackson is released on 5 p.m. on the day that it's released, there will be a rally at the federal courthouse in St. Paul. Grace will be speaking along with a lot of other awesome people. So we don't know what day that will be, but keep watch because that will be something that you do not want to miss.
Yeah, and we'll send out an emergency email alert too, right?
We will.
Okay,
yes, absolutely.
Great. Moses, I want to read one more paragraph from this article, get your response, and then we can move on to our next topic, just because this is a really great article. He continues, he says, by marching for pride, instead of marching for gay, sex, or sex change operations for minors, the public isn't asked to affirm actions and appearances they often instinctively find distasteful. They are asked to affirm what people should not feel ashamed of themselves, that people should not feel ashamed of themselves. Those who hold to biblical standards of sex and sexuality are forced to play the entire game on their side of the 50-yard line. Do you really want people to feel bad about themselves? Do you want to make people suffer? Aren't you concerned about suicide and self-loathing? How can anyone be against pride if the alternative is violent, morbid, relentless shame? Pride Month turns a moral argument about which the Bible has clear and unequivocal answers, meaning unchanging, into a quest for personal acceptance, which is why many soft-hearted and muddle-headed Christians line up for the parade just like everyone else. And I think that just hits it out of the park.
Fire.
I think that's why so many Christians are getting on board. So many Christians are afraid of being seen as unloving and being seen as like wanting to make people suffer, or that's what they're afraid of, and so then they jump on board.
And I think that's really what that makes me think of is how there's this panic over bullying in schools, especially really over the last 10 years, not as much anymore. The idea that if we don't have this really open and affirming culture saying in high schools and middle schools saying it's amazing to be gay, telling kids if you're gay, that's the best thing you could possibly be. If you're transgender, that's actually even better. But if you're gay, that's pretty great. And just like that message being relentlessly pounded into kids' heads, that's the only thing you can do, because if you don't do that, then there will be an atmosphere of bullying, and kids will be hurt, and kids will ultimately, as Kevin DeYoung says here, they'll commit suicide if they're not affirmed. And I fully reject that dichotomy. There are several important steps to take between bullying a kid so that they feel suicidal and telling them that the life choice that they're making is the best thing that they could possibly be doing. There's several steps in between there. I don't support bullying anyone. No one should be bullied. That's a bad thing. We're against bullying here at the Family Beacon. But we're also...
Well, Moses bullies me every day, so he's lying.
That's not true. I should state for the record. But it's like so I will stand against bullying, and I will stand for biblical standards on sexuality, and you can do both of those things at the same time. It's not bullying to stand up and say male and female is what you're is the way we're created.
No, that's so true. That's so true.
Right.
And as Kevin says, this is the most fire quote, I think. He says, if you need the world of sports, entertainment, education, media, and the government to celebrate your sexuality in order to feel proud, maybe your conscience is trying to tell you something.
Yes, that's a great line.
Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And should we be encouraging kids in that? Should we be encouraging kids to embrace something that's not natural? No. Nope.
So that article by Kevin DeYoung will be in the description. I hope you're able to take a look, because we thought that it was really good. Another thing that's happened that we've also kept you guys up to speed on the podcast is attacks on pro-life organizations. So another thing that we've been discussing is, and keeping you guys in the loop on, is attacks on pro-life groups and on pregnancy resource centers. We've talked about the attack on a sister organization in Wisconsin. And I think we discussed at least one other attack on the podcast, but there have been 2 more, or even 3 more.
Yeah,
if we account
Justice Kavanaugh.
Yes, yeah. So I'll talk about these briefly. So there was an attack on a pro-life pregnancy center in Buffalo, an arson attack, and then just yesterday, a pro-life pregnancy center in North Carolina was vandalized. And again, we see the bucket of red paint, and again, we see...
If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. That's what they're saying.
That seems to be the slogan of these attacks, and it's always written in the same font, or the same kind of cursive-y handwriting, which I find interesting, because we don't it's not probably the same people, but it's the same group.
Jane's Revenge.
I keep thinking Jane's Addiction, which is a band I used to listen to.
Well, I just really want to say to our audience, this is just another example. Obviously, we don't want to categorize all people that are pro-choice into this bucket. These are people that are actually committing arson, right? These are people that are domestic terrorists in our country, and not everyone who's pro-choice is a domestic terrorist. So we want to get that straight, first of all.
Right.
So we're not lumping everyone together.
True.
But still, I have not seen any pro-choice activists come out and condemn these attacks. Have you, Moses?
No, in fact, I haven't even seen President Biden condemn the threat on Justice Kavanaugh's life.
Me neither. And so,
isn't that interesting?
While everyone who's pro-choice, clearly, of course, is not a domestic terrorist, we're not saying that. What I would like to say is that Moses and I and Minnesota Family Council is calling upon pro-choice activists to condemn these acts of violence, because no matter what side of the aisle you fall on with the issue of abortion, you should agree that these attacks are despicable. And not only that, but I find it so ironic that the side, and again, these are the domestic terrorists on the side, but still, they're part of the pro-choice side. They're part of the side that says that we're pro-choice, that we're pro-women, women's empowerment, we're pro-women choosing what's right for them.
Yeah.
Well, if they're so pro-choosing what's right for them, how come they are attacking the very places that provide women the choice to choose life?
Yeah.
Like, they shouldn't be against women choosing one thing or the other, but apparently they are, right?
Yeah.
And then they also are constantly arguing, okay, well, you're not actually pro-life, you're just pro-birth. But then they go and attack the very facilities that enable us to be pro-life after birth, right? And so, yeah, I would appreciate...
They picked the wrong target.
They did.
Absolutely.
They absolutely. I mean, it makes them look bad. And I think pro-choice activists, if they aren't domestic terrorists, should come out and condemn that, because we can find some common ground there. I mean, I think, honestly, there is a lot of room for common ground. Because I think both sides, in general, most of the time, the pro-choice side does agree that women should be able to choose life if that's what they want, right? They believe that women should have the right to choose. But I don't see them coming out and saying that enough. Like, I think we can rally behind the fact that if women want to choose life, we should support them in choosing life. We just don't see them doing that enough.
And I think many pro-lifers would agree with most pro-abortion people that there needs to be more done for
100%.
poor women who are stuck in the position of an unplanned pregnancy.
Or even maternity leave. Like, I would love to see paid maternity leave.
Paid maternity leave.
I would love to see that.
Controversial opinion from Grace Evans. And actually, there's some really interesting proposals. Actually, State Senator Julie Coleman here in Minnesota, she released a bill that would do that in a way that was friendly to the free market.
Love it.
And I thought it was a really great bill.
That's
great.
I
hope that the next governor actually does something about it.
Yeah. But anyways, that's happening, and
it's horrifying, honestly.
And I tweeted this out on MFC's account today, just that, you know, as we get closer and closer to the Dobbs decision, we get closer and closer to living in a post-Roe America. But every day that we get closer to it, the target on our backs is growing larger.
Absolutely.
The target on Minnesota Family Council's back is growing larger, and on every pro-life activist's back. But especially ours here in Minnesota. We're one of the leading pro-life organizations here in our state. And I just want to say, we're not backing down. It is a time where we know that as soon as the decision comes, we are immediately going to be front and center. Everyone's eyes are going to be upon us. Likely, our office will be broken into. I'm expecting that, honestly. And
I hope not.
I hope not.
I don't call that likely.
I hope not. I expect it will be, honestly.
Jeez.
I expect it. But you know what? Moses and I are on the only side that matters. That's what I tweeted out. We're on the only side that matters, and we're on the winning side. We're on God's side, and that's what matters. And we're not backing down. I mean, this this is something that is worth fighting for, right, Moses?
Absolutely it is. And I should mention that there's a tie-in. In addition to the podcast, as most of you know, we also have the Family Beacon blog, and we have great posts there every week. And there's a blog post this week about those attacks and about how the pro-life movement will not back down in the face of them by our writer, Luke Mueller. So check that out. I want to talk also, Grace, about another aspect of the abortion debate, which is how women have been disappeared forcibly from the whole debate.
Yes.
Just a few years ago, abortion was supposed to be a women's issue.
Yeah, it was all about women's rights, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be non-controversial that women were the people who got pregnant and occasionally tragically had abortions.
Moses, can you tell me what it's like to be pregnant?
I unfortunately I can't. My wife has given me some clues, but I certainly couldn't put myself in her shoes or those of any woman who's pregnant. But there's an interesting article in the New York Times called "A Vanishing Word in Abortion Debate: Women," and I find that interesting. Whenever the New York Times covers something, it's always really interesting to see what they say. This is, of course, the bedrock, the bastion of progressive opinion. And even here, there's some. Well, I'll just read some sections from this article. So the blurb is: progressive groups and medical organizations have adopted inclusive language, which has led to terms like pregnant people and chest feeding. So it talks about the ACLU, and the ACLU released this statement about abortion, and it just doesn't mention women. And so the author, Michael Powell, writes, "This was not an oversight, nor was it peculiar to the language favored by the ACLU." You should read
the statement, though. It explains it to our audience.
Yes. Yeah. So this is what the ACLU will say about abortion. Abortion bans disproportionately harm Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, the LGBTQ community, immigrants, young people, those working to make ends meet, people with disabilities. Protecting abortion access is an urgent matter of racial and economic justice.
So basically, they just neutered the campaign for abortion rights.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly what they've done. It's like abortion has no gender, when, of course, older progressive activists would insist that this is something that women in particular have to speak on, and that if you don't have a uterus, you don't have an
opinion.
Exactly. Well, although it should have been the other way around, because I'm the one without one.
Okay, wait. I saw this really funny meme, and it was, the 2-button one where you can choose one button.
Yeah.
And the guy's sweating, and one was no uterus, no opinion, and one was men can get pregnant or give birth. Right. It's just hilarious. But that's really where we are, honestly, as a culture. It's like you have to choose one.
You have to choose one, and it's interesting. This article, as recently as 2018, NARAL, one of the big pro-abortion groups, talked about. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is 2020. In 2020, they issued a guide to activists, stressed that they should talk about a woman's choice. 2 years later, the same guide emphasized the need for quote unquote gender neutral language.
Wow. And that just shows how far we've gone in so short of a time, right? It's moved so fast.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And it's moved beyond the abortion industry, as this article points out. So the Cleveland Clinic, which is one of the best-known hospitals in the country, has the question, trigger warning, anatomical language, who has a vagina? It answers, people who are assigned female at birth, AFAB, have vaginas. The American Cancer Society recommends cancer screenings for people with a cervix. Now,
Which only women can have a cervix, folks.
Yeah. It's just like...
Okay, wait.
It's absurd.
I want to read you something, too, because this is something that was tweeted out May 4th, 2022, by the National Women's Law Center.
Oh, no.
They said, in case you didn't hear it right the first time, people of all genders need abortions. People of all genders need abortions. People of all genders need abortions. I said it 6 times in repetition. And I don't know. There's groups like this tweeting this out, and this is the National Women's Law Center, and I thought, looks like they just lost their credibility as a women's law center, right?
Okay. Answer me this, Grace.
Yes, okay.
Isn't there have to be at least one gender that can't have an abortion? Are they really saying that cisgender heterosexual males to use their own...
I mean, apparently they can.
That's a gender. That's the gender that I would have if I had a gender, but I don't. But that would be...
My gender is unicorn. I go by you and I.
Oh, no. I've heard of plant self.
I've heard of demon self. Have
oh
you seen
yeah.
that?
Oh my gosh.
Goodness. Okay, let me read you. I want to read you a quote. This is a really good comeback from an article by The Atlantic. This is written by Helen Lewis, who is from Britain, and she is actually a proponent of abortion. Mm-hmm. But she thinks that what's going on, the erasure of women from the abortion movement, is actually hurting the abortion movement. And she says, something is lost when abortion rights activists shy away from saying women. We lose the ability to talk about women as more than a random collection of organs, bodies that happen to menstruate or bleed or give birth. We lose the ability to connect women's common experiences and the discrimination they face in a course of a reproductive lifetime. By substituting people for women, we lose the ability to speak of women as a class. We dismantle them into pieces, into functions, into commodities. This happens in many ways. This week, I also saw an Axios editor rebuke a New York Times reporter for writing surrogate mothers rather than gestational carriers, as if the latter phrase were not dehumanizing, a whisper away from vessels. That quote, even pro-choice activists can come and see, a lot of them are seeing, okay, it's actually hurting the abortion movement to completely alienate their base. That's what they're doing, right? They're alienating their base. The only people who can get an abortion are women. The only people who can get pregnant are women. But suddenly they're acting like anyone can get pregnant.
A woman is a real thing. It's something different than the alternative. And once you say that Caitlyn Jenner is just as much in need of quote unquote abortion care as someone who actually has a uterus or a cervix, then that's just absurd. It becomes an absolutely Orwellian use of language.
Mm-hmm. So one more comment I want to make, Moses, about this is I keep asking myself why. Like, why are they doing this? Why? I mean, obviously they're virtue signaling, but why would they do something that's so obviously going to hinder them and anger a lot of women, right? A lot of their base. Well, I've come to the conclusion that I think it's because pointing out that women are the ones who need abortions is pretty first wave. What I mean by that is, there's like first wave feminism, there's second wave feminism, there's third wave feminism. With all the waves of feminism, they got more and more radical, right?
It became like a tsunami.
Yeah, like they had to do something new. They didn't want to be old school anymore. They wanted to keep it spicy. Well, that's what I'm seeing happening with the abortion.
Spicy tsunami.
That's what I'm seeing happening with the abortion movement. I mean, originally, it was flashy, it was new, it was a little bit controversial to say that women need abortion, right? In 1973, that was pretty controversial. But now, that's pretty boring to a lot of people, right? It's like, okay, well, like, we fought that fight, but you know what's a lot flashier? It's a lot flashier to say, you know what, we're being really inclusive, and now we're going to say this next trendy thing, because they're trying to jump on board with the trends, I feel like. And it does come down to virtue signaling, but I think it's they see their previous stances outdated. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be outdated. They don't want to be on the wrong side of history.
Right. Because when you're pushed to and fro by the winds of cultural change, you'll inevitably end up doing a 180 on yourself. And you used to say 5 years ago that there was something such as a women's march and women's rights matter. And one of those rights, perhaps the most important, is the right to legal abortion. And now women don't exist anymore. And it's a genderless people's march or whatever. And
that's the thing, the Women's March. Okay, so I watched the Matt Walsh documentary, What is a Woman? And we'll talk about it next week when you watch it. But
yes,
I watched
can't wait
it.
To see
so
it.
He was, in the documentary, he's trying to find an answer to what a woman is, right? And he goes to the Women's March, and he asks the women, what is a woman? Can you tell me what a woman is? No one can answer him. Isn't that hilarious? It's like, okay, well, why do you call it a Women's March then?
Oh, my gosh.
Why are we calling it a Women's March if it's, apparently now it's a people with cervixes march?
I give us 2 years before they change it to genderless People's March.
Birthing Persons March.
No. The
gender people with the cervix march.
Genderless Rainbow Unicorn March on Washington.
You unite.
Oh my gosh, I can't do that. I can't deal with that seriously.
Okay.
One topic that is a little bit more serious, Grace, is.
I mean, this is serious too. It
is serious, but it's also easy to ridicule. Mm-hmm. So we as a pro-life group, we get questions about what's going to happen. What's going to happen after Roe v. Wade is overturned, Lord willing, when it is. And one question we get from state legislators and from our supporters and people who are on the fence is just this question of, we've heard this narrative that before Roe v. Wade, women would die in botched back alley abortions, and thousands of them would die. And that was really bad. We don't want to go back to that. In fact, there's someone in our work parking lot who has a Planned Parenthood sticker on their Subaru Outback, inevitably. I have a Subaru too, but most Subaru owners are very left-wing. And it says, it's a Planned Parenthood sticker, and it says, "We won't go back." And that's the whole idea. They think that there's this dark, if you don't have legal abortion, then it's basically the Dark Ages, and we're
it's a
going to
real
all
fear
die
for a lot of women.
It's a real fear of a lot of women. I'm not
minimizing
that at all.
Yep.
So at any rate, you were asked the question, Grace, will women die if Roe v. Wade is overturned? And you came up with, I think, some really fascinating information. And I think that all of us would be benefited if you shared that.
Thanks, Moses. I appreciate that. So, we're seeing this message everywhere, right? We saw it on the pro-life pregnancy resource centers, right? If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either, right?
Right, in the graffiti.
Right. Yeah. So they're saying, on the graffiti. That's a good catch. But yeah, so we're seeing that everywhere. Everyone's saying, that's the fear-mongering we're seeing. I have a few points that I think will help you navigate this. If you hear this argument and you don't know how to respond, I hope this episode can be a resource for you. It doesn't have all the answers. I feel like, honestly, we could have done a full episode on this, Moses.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to get through. But number one, if people say, okay, if Roe is overturned, women are going to die, here's the number one thing that you should keep in your mind and that you should say lovingly. First, we're going to have compassion for the women that are fearful, right? We need to have that compassion, especially if you're having the conversation with a woman who potentially is facing an unplanned pregnancy, right? So have the compassion, but keep at the forefront of your mind that just because people will still do something dangerous and unethical, if that action is made illegal, does not justify that you should keep that dangerous and unethical action legal.
Right.
So let's do an example for our base that would be helpful. Like, people are still going to commit suicide if euthanasia isn't legal. And they're going to likely go to worse extremes to do so, right? They're going to find back alleyways, quote unquote, to do that. But that doesn't justify the legalization of euthanasia. And so because our government is instituted to punish evil and to promote good, to protect the weak and the vulnerable from oppression, that's why our laws should reflect what is good, true, and beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Our laws should reflect protecting the most innocent. And building off of that, just briefly, legality in a lot of people's eyes is seen as morality. So a lot of people think, okay, if something's legal, then it's moral. And that's why so many Americans think that they support Roe v. Wade. Yeah. But then when it's actually explained to them what Roe actually is, because oftentimes they don't know, then they realize, oh, we actually don't support it, or we don't fully support that because I was misinformed on what it was all the time.
Right.
And so really what our laws need to reflect is morality. And if you apply it to any other situation, any other dangerous and unethical action you see, okay, I would agree that thing should be illegal, right? Like, no one's going to say that child abuse should be legal because people are going to go and find nastier, more disgusting ways to abuse children if it's illegal, right? Yeah. Everyone would be on board with abolishing it. So that's something that is a really good point, I think, for you guys to talk about and to keep in your mind, because ultimately that's the bottom line. But also, we need to remember that we have the abortion lobby to blame for fear-mongering these vulnerable women, for manipulating these vulnerable women who are facing unplanned pregnancies.
That is so true.
It is not the pro-life movement who is fear-mongering and manipulating women. It is undoubtedly the abortion lobby. They're the ones that are making women feel so alone, hopeless, and make them feel like they must buy into the lie that without abortion access, they will lose fundamental rights.
You know,
right?
Even the Planned Parenthood slogan, care no matter what, it's like vaguely threatening if you think about it. It's like, it invites you, I think, if you're a woman, it invites you to think about how horrible it would be if my birth control failed or whatever, because and it invites you to think about that, and it reminds you that Planned Parenthood would take your little problem away in, of course, a violent and horrific way. And I didn't mean to cut you off mid-flow, but even when the abortion industry appears to be loving and compassionate
That's actually a great transition.
to vulnerable women, it's actually they're continuing to exploit and lie to them.
Absolutely. Great transition into my point. And let's remember, bottom line, too, Planned Parenthood is doing this all for money. Abortion providers are doing this all for money. Abortions are where they get the most of their profit from. So let's remember that. They see women not as a person, they see them as money, dollar signs. That's what they see women as. So if the abortion lobby actually cared about protecting women and helping protect them from unsafe abortions, because they keep saying, women, you're going to die, you're going to face unsafe abortions, you're not going to be safe, it's going to be such a bad state of our country when Roe is abolished for you, they would actually be enabling women to seek safe abortion, right? They wouldn't be pushing abortion by pill. So do you want to talk a little bit about Just the Pill, Moses, that's headquartered here in Minnesota?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important for our audience to understand. Do you want me to give a brief intro and then you can...
Yeah, go ahead.
So chemical abortions, which are abortion by pill, they lack proper medical oversight. They're something that's mailed to women, or they can pick them up, but they're mailed to them.
It doesn't have to be, but particularly since the pandemic, it's been something that instead of something you do in a clinic under observation, it's mailed to you. You do it at home.
So they lack proper medical oversight because women aren't going into the facility and getting an ultrasound done, making sure like the abortion provider knows how far along she is, making sure it's not an ectopic pregnancy, because if she has one of those, it would be so dangerous for her to take an abortion by pill. None of that's happening. And also, you're not supposed to take abortion by pill once you're into the second trimester because it's unsafe for you. But there's none of that, right? It's a woman guessing, because usually she's getting it online now. That's become much more mainstream. So they're far more easy to obtain illegally, actually. And they also carry very significant risk for women. So one study showed that emergency room visits following chemical abortions increased 500% between 2002 to 2015, which is an insane increase. Not only that, but if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy or is further along than she thought, like we just discussed, then she can end up seriously hemorrhaging on her floor, losing lots of blood on her bathroom floor by herself, alone, and sometimes she can even die from that because she loses so much blood. And I mean, if you're losing a ton of blood on your floor, you think maybe this is normal because it's an abortion, like I don't know what to expect. You're alone. Are you even going to be able to pick up the phone and call? Do you even know if you should pick up the phone and call, right? And by that point, is the ambulance even going to get there fast enough, right? And so that's not helpful for women.
Women certainly do die from this. Women have died from this.
Yes.
And the fact, as Grace, you were saying, that this organization is based in Minnesota. Not only that, but just the pill is based here in Minnesota, and they focus on serving people who can't or don't want to get a surgical abortion. But once that, if Dobbs goes the way we hope, then surgical abortions are going to be really hard, if not impossible, to get in some states, for example, the Dakotas. So then Just the Pill, headquartered in Minneapolis or St. Paul, is positioned very well to provide these pills, which
to all our border states.
To all our border states. And as Grace said, what they're basically doing is inducing a miscarriage. And this is just such a horrible thing to talk about, but miscarriage is not something that as a man, I've never gone through it myself, but I have had firsthand experience of it, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And the fact that is what this pill intends to do, that's what it does in the best case scenario, is induce a miscarriage, is absolutely horrific and just barbaric. And it's really common for women to not understand where they are at gestationally, to think that they are at 6 weeks when they're actually at 12 weeks or something like that. And when you take the pill at 6 weeks versus when you take it at 12 weeks, it is a much more dangerous proposition for you. There's just a lot more in there, just to put it bluntly. And it's horrifying, but that, and you know what, there's actually an organization in Europe that is sending the pill to American people, and it's illegal. And the abortion pills already being smuggled in from Mexico. So this really is our next battle.
Next front on the fight for life, for sure.
As well as, in Minnesota, we have to make abortion illegal, period, because it won't become illegal immediately if Roe v. Wade is overturned. But we also will need to fight this pernicious, barbaric, horrifying process of abortion from the pill. Yeah,
because not only does it hurt women physically, like we've already outlined, and again, the abortion lobby should be standing against these pills because they hurt women, right? But it also impacts women emotionally. I mean, imagine the trauma of your personal bathroom at your house or at your dorm, wherever you are, becoming the abortion facility, becoming the place where your child is delivered dead in front of you, becoming the tomb of your child, the graveyard of your child. That's what the abortion industry is pushing upon women. Imagine having to enter that room day after day to get ready in the morning and remembering the trauma that you had to go through by yourself. That's what the abortion industry is pushing on women. And the pro-life movement understands that women must be protected from that lasting emotional and physical trauma of undergoing back alley abortions by pill. So let's face it, all Roe did, when Roe v. Wade was established, all it did was push back alley abortions into the front alley, right? Yeah. It made abortions that are not safe for women legal.
Yeah.
So you can say like they're still alley abortions because they're unsafe for women. That transitions into my next point that you guys need to keep in mind when you're talking to people about this issue. People are going to say, okay, so safe abortion exists now, but it's going to be unsafe after Roe. That's their argument. Well, safe abortion doesn't exist, period. It doesn't exist. Obviously, as you know, if you're watching this, you're very pro-life. Abortion is never safe for an innocent child, but it's also never safe for women, even if you're not doing abortion by pill, which, again, is being pushed upon women. Just with regular abortions that are not abortion by pill, whether this is a DNC abortion or injecting a saline injection into women, those abortions are not safe for women either. Women are already dying from legal abortions.
Right.
I mean, just here in Minnesota, at the Minnesota Planned Parenthood, ambulances have been cited going to and fro from the Planned Parenthood. They've been seen at many other Planned Parenthood facilities too. They ferry women from abortion facility to hospital after botched abortion. Sometimes women tragically die. I mean, there's plenty of women that you can go online and you can hear their stories that died from abortions, like Tanya Reeves. That's one woman who died from a legal abortion again. And even when women don't die from abortion, it's still not safe for them. I mean, they're faced with lifelong complications, Moses. We've talked about this in the podcast before, but they have such an increased chance of suicide and depression. They have an increased chance of infertility. They have an increased chance of surgical admissions, increased chance of undergoing preterm delivery. So many complications arise after undergoing an abortion. And so there is no safe abortion. So it's like saying, so they're completely lying when they say, well, it's safe right now, but it's going to be made unsafe. Abortion is never safe. It shouldn't ever be an option for women because it hurts women, right? I want to talk, though, specifically about statistics because that's what people are always bringing into it, right, Moses?
Yeah.
They're always like, okay, but like before Roe, so many women were dying from abortions, right? And that's not accurate at all. And that's actually been, people have actually admitted, pro-choice activists have actually admitted that they manipulated the statistics drastically. So if we speak historically, we look at the data, right, Moses? This is the claim. The claim was that tens of thousands of women were dying due to illegal abortion before Roe. That's the claim. And this was put forward by NARAL founders, which is the National Abortion Rights Action League. The founders, Larry Lader and Bernard Nathanson. They were the founders, and they pushed this narrative forward, Moses. And they said, tens of thousands of women are dying. We need to make it legal so that they're not going to die. And a lot of people's heartstrings were tugged on, right? They were like, oh my gosh, women are dying from these procedures. If we just made it legal, they would stop dying because they could be safe, right? Well, eventually, Bernard Nathanson, one of the founders of that organization, became a pro-life activist. And after realizing the harm that abortion poses to women and children, he came out and stated this. He said, how many deaths were we talking about when abortion was illegal? In NARAL, we generally emphasize the drama of the individual case, not the mass statistics, but when we spoke of the latter, it was always 5,000 to 10,000 a year. I confess that I knew the figures were totally false.
Wow.
But in the morality, he says, of our revolution, it was a useful figure, widely accepted, so why go out of our way to correct it with honest statistics? He continues, we fed the public a line of deceit, dishonesty, a fabrication of statistics and figures. We succeeded in breaking down the laws limiting abortions because the time was right and the news media cooperated. We then sensationalized the effects of illegal abortion and fabricated polls which indicated that 85% of the public favored unrestricted abortion when we knew it was only 5%.
Wow.
They knew it was only 5%, but they said it was 85%. We unashamedly lied, and yet our statements were quoted by the media as though they had been written in law. So that's the founder of NARAL coming out and saying that those statistics were totally fabricated. And if you look at the statistics yourself, like you can go online and look, in 1972, that was the year before Roe, 39 women died from illegal abortion and 24 died from legal abortion, Moses. And in 1973, the year that Roe was legalized, 19 women died from illegal abortion and 25 women died from legal abortion. So what we can take away from that statistic, what we can take away from those facts is that in the year that Roe v. Wade was passed, more women died from legal abortion than illegal abortion. So I don't really know where they're getting this argument from. I mean, it's from the manipulation, right, of the media.
Right.
But I think we need to come back to the fact, we need to realize this other historical fact, that before Roe, the majority of illegal abortions were not these like coat hanger abortions that people are constantly talking about, where women go and perform abortions on themselves and then end up severely injured and sometimes dead. That was not very common. Rather, the majority of abortions were actually being committed by medical professionals.
Yeah.
They were being committed by them. And the hidden goal behind these legislations, behind Roe v. Wade getting passed, was different than what the activists were actually claiming. Because pro-abortion doctors were hoping to gain legal protection, they were hoping to gain insurance rather for the procedures they were already committing, because they were already committing these. Women were already
not to
dying
mention
from
presumably
these.
more money.
Right, more, and probably more money. But they didn't hope to reduce the danger of back-alley abortions. Women were already dying from these procedures that they were committing. Rather, they just wanted to legalize the practice they were already doing.
Many of these illegal abortions not only were performed by doctors, but were even performed in clinics or like a clinical setting, where it was, not safe. We would never say that an abortion is safe, but at least, the instruments were sterilized and things like that.
And then one other thing I want to comment on, besides just the statistics, is so the abortion providers, they keep hammering down, it's going to be so unsafe for women. It's going to be so unsafe for women. And yet they oppose every single legislation that would help women have safer abortions. Like, there recently, Planned Parenthood strongly opposed this legislation that was put forth that would require them to have hallways that were wide enough for a gurney, which a gurney is those trolleys that you take off of an ambulance if a woman has to be rushed to an ER or hospital. They oppose legislation that would enable those hallways, that would require, I should say, those hallways to be wide enough for that. I mean, if they really cared about women, if they really cared about safety, why would they oppose that sort of legislation, right?
And they don't even want, as we've discussed, I think, just last week, they don't want abortion clinics to be licensed. Yeah,
exactly. All of these things. So who really is on women's side here? Who really cares about women's safety? Because if you cared about women's safety, you wouldn't want to push abortion on them at all, because it's never safe for women. But okay, let's say you think it should be legal in some cases. Let's say that. Well, you should still, at the very least, be supporting procedures and laws that would absolutely require the most safe possible outcome for women. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there should be no debate about if your hallway should be wide enough for an emergency bed to be pushed through the hallway in case a woman is at risk of dying.
Yeah.
Why are people opposing this? And so these are all some talking points that I really hope you guys find useful. Remember to bring it back to that number one claim, though, that people are still going to do things that are dangerous and unethical, even if an action is made illegal, right? So it doesn't justify keeping that dangerous and unethical action legal.
I do think that's
that.
I do think that is the most crucial point. And I'm going to ask you, something I haven't asked before, but would you please make that into a blog post, because I think it would be so helpful.
You have asked me to make a blog post before, Moses.
No, I mean not on this. This topic.
On the podcast.
Not on this specific topic. So
I was thinking we should maybe do an unwoke video, honestly.
That would be cool. Shoot us a comment if you'd like to see an unwoke video about this topic, but we'll certainly at least do a blog post, probably not releasing at the same time that this podcast, but in the coming weeks as this conversation really and it's going to get crazy. It's going to get crazy if Dobbs goes the way that it's supposed. And again,
the target on our back keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
We're not backing down, though. Right, Moses?
We're not backing down. Absolutely not backing down. The pro-life movement will never, ever, ever stop fighting for not just children, but women, and for their rights, for their protection. I mean, if Grace has said anything today, it's that women are not safe physically or emotionally or spiritually. Well, as long as abortion is legal. Exactly.
Right. And Moses and I in Minnesota Family Council, we envision a world where women feel so loved, so cared for, so supported by the pro-life movement and by pro-choicers that decide to come over to our side. We envision a world where they feel so loved that abortion is not even an option that crosses their mind. They feel so supported. They feel like they are empowered to continue with a pregnancy or even potentially put that child up for adoption, but they feel so supported in choosing life that abortion never crosses their mind. That's a world we envision. That's in Minnesota we envision. And it's coming to Minnesota, right, Moses?
It's coming to Minnesota. That's the future we see.
That dream is going to become a reality.
It's going to become a reality. We invite you to join us. So those are the facts. And now we hope that you can stand with us, that we will stand firm for truth in our state and our nation. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Family Beacon podcast. We will be back soon with more great content for you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, that like button, whatever platform you're watching on, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.